morning and welcome to the headquarters of the United Workers' Party at Colony House in Castries. Today, this press conference has been convened because of the gross inaccuracies by Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre. And although it is not the habit of the United Workers' Party to engage in frivolous press conferences just for the sake of having press conferences, it was found to be absolutely necessary to correct the inaccuracies in the statements which were made yesterday by Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre. Today, we have former Prime Minister and current Leader of the Opposition and Parliamentary Representative for Micoud South, Alan Chasney. We also have Senator Angelina Ferrer-Polius, who is a former candidate for the Dennery North constituency. And we also have former Minister of Tourism, Dominic Fede, who was the former representative for canneries, ancillary canneries. As a result of these inaccuracies, which were made yesterday by the current Prime Minister, a number of issues have arisen, and first off today will be Dominic Fede, who will address a number of these issues relating to tourism and COVID-19 response here in St. Lucia under this current administration. Of course, you will remember that Dominic Fede was the chair of the command center during the previous United Workers' Party administration. Dominic Fede.
Thank you very much to the moderator this afternoon. I want to specially recognize, it's this morning, our political leader, Honorable Alan Chasney, also the member from Micoud South, and the firebrand amidst us here this morning, Senator Ferrer-Polius from Dennery North. I want to also recognize in the audience the Deputy Leader of the United Workers' Party in another firebrand lady, Fortuna Belrose. We have our Hall of Fame member, Mr. Sleepy, Mr. Skinny, and then the former mayor of Castries. Other members of the press, thank you for being here this morning, and of course you looking at us live on Facebook. Now, today it is unfortunate that we've had to come back to speak to you so quickly, because we thought that after our press conference last week and how forcibly we would have brought over some of the points and our loud cry for there to be a quick response, a proactive approach for the government to deal with this very dark hour in our country, we see very little or no response from the current administration. In fact, since we last spoke to you, things have gotten progressively worse. We see the level of victimization continues to happen. We see the level of petty politicking rather than governing the country persisting. And we see as well a number of empty promises continue to face the people of St. Lucia. But all that in the middle of the fifth wave of COVID-19. Information that was disclosed from the Ministry of Health suggests that to date there are over 4,000 infections that have happened in a short period of a matter of weeks. The average daily case per day is 136 infections we see happening. Unfortunately, and I do not intend on politicizing this, but I think it would be very remiss of me if I did not express our deepest sympathy to the families who are grieving today, because the stats suggest that in the last month or so, 18 St. Lucians have passed away due to COVID-19. This is a total of 314 since the pandemic began. St. Lucian now leads the OECS in the number of deaths. In fact, this administration has presided over 230. It would mean that within a short 5 months, they would have surpassed the total sum of deaths in any other OECS country. This, ladies and gentlemen, points to the quantum mismanagement with which they have presided over the management of COVID-19. And when we speak, they say that we're politicizing COVID. But all we're asking for is for an urgency of now so that we can prevent more of our family members, of those that we love, of those that we care about. We're just pleading. We're using our collective voices to sound an urgency of now so that if we can just do one thing, is to prevent more of our families from dying, more of our citizens from getting sick. To date, we have some 3,349 active cases. It would mean that everyone in St. Lucia knows someone who is infected with COVID-19. Just today, our PR team have reported that many media houses are unable to be here because they're dealing with short staff due to the high levels of infections that we're seeing. But this does not only affect our colleagues in the media. This also impacts bus drivers, frontliners. It impacts teachers. And my colleague will deal with the education system and the impact that COVID is having on that sector. But it impacts hotel employees, law offices. It impacts every single sector in our country today is feeling the pinch from this government's mismanagement of the pandemic. We see that vaccination rates continues to be stubbornly low. Some 50,000 individuals, or less than 30% of our population, is fully vaccinated. In the booster shots, the latest information we've received suggests that just 5,552, a very small percentage of our population, that have been vaccinated. And so here are the two extremes. A rapid rise in the number of cases, a lack of quarantine facilities, and a high number of individuals that are largely exposed due to vaccinations. I saw the explanation given by some of our stakeholders that the Omicron variant is not as, they say, devastating as other variants, while it is highly transmissible. However, the disruption that this is causing throughout the world and indeed the Caribbean is at unacceptable and untenable levels. And something needs to be done so that we can lessen the disruption that it is causing on our social and economic fabric in our country. There remains no confirmation of Omicron in St. Lucia. It is sad that after so long that we cannot tell the people of St. Lucia for sure what we are dealing with. Or we ourselves really don't know, but we can only suspect that we are dealing with the new variant. What is taking us so long? The government cannot continue to shoot in the dark as it has. If you don't know what enemy that you're fighting, you are going to lose the war. No wonder we continue to see that this variant or this fifth wave is wreaking havoc on our population. And while we do so, there's no sense of urgency from the leadership. There's no national crisis, no sounding of the alarm. They are now blaming you, the people of St. Lucia. They're now saying that you are totally responsible for your well-being and your health. They have now passed the buck, because what their own supporters have recognized, that there is no leadership ability in the tank or in the cabinet. In fact, in the words of a well-known supporter of the SLP, he suggested in a tape that went viral that SLP supporters and the people of St. Lucia should not expect any dynamism from the current Prime Minister and the cabinet. He suggested that the Prime Minister is at best a transitional leader. That's what he said. He's just there to transition. He's just there to take the party from one period to another. These are not our words. These are the words of a very influential SLP insider. And so no wonder we continue to see the people of St. Lucia are losing confidence in this administration. No wonder we see that business is losing confidence in this administration. No wonder we continue to see that there is a high and rising level of anxiety all across this country. But as the failure to deal with COVID-19 continues, we also see that this government, they are presiding over unprecedented levels of victimization. And we have to continue talking about this week after week, because we are getting daily reports of people being victimized purely on the basis of which political party they support. I have never seen the level of victimization happen in this country in the history of our democracy. And so when we look at what is happening blatantly, contractors are losing their contracts because they're deemed or have been deemed to be supporters of the UWP. They continue to fire village council and city council workers across the country. Caregivers are losing their jobs in droves. The caretakers who cut the grass at the side of the road continue to lose their jobs. The farmers now, the agriculture sector, are now the latest victims of victimization, where several farmers island-wide are being decertified because they seem to be UWP supporters. Even their own board members cannot escape the wrath of the SLP's guillotine. We see that on social media, their board members are being victimized for simply expressing a dissenting view about the direction in which statutory bodies should go in this country. All of this while they remain quiet about employees within their camp, supporters of the SLP that have displayed clear evidence where they threaten to kill citizens of this country. This really cannot continue. And instead of dealing with COVID-19, we continue to see empty promises. When will the people of St. Lucia see the 1-5 promise by the Prime Minister while in opposition, and has now said that he didn't say that while in opposition, of 1,005 in income support? He said that the 500 which the previous UWP administration had given, it was too small. And immediately upon returning into office, the SLP would ensure that they would give 1,005. Excise taxes for fishermen was promised as well. They are still waiting in ancillary. They're still waiting in canneries, Mr. Prime Minister, on your empty promises. All tax refunds below 5,000 was promised to all citizens within 100 days of being elected. Have those promises been met, or was just an election gimmick? Was it just like your scare of closing the borders because you thought that the tourism industry, or you convinced the people that the tourism industry was the industry that was bringing the virus to St. Lucia, and that the people of St. Lucia were at continuous risk as a result of tourists coming to the country? Today, we see a different story. We see an administration that is proud to pretend as if the current successes we're seeing within the tourism industry had anything to do with them. And so we feel extremely vindicated in the UWP that we took the hard decisions and we did the right thing to balance between lives and livelihoods by ensuring that the tourism sector remained open. And I'm very, very proud to suggest and to say that at the time when we had left, we went from 0 jobs to recovering some 8,500 jobs within the tourism sector. And so those jobs, because of your lack of foresight, because of your lack of ability to anticipate, because of this current administration's inability to look at the future and preempt the challenges of the sector, we're seeing that the projected bookings for the winter season are now waning. Hotels are reporting significant declines in cancellations, in lower occupancies than expected. Some of the major hotels, when they would normally be at a 90% to 100% at this time of the year, are struggling with a 70-75% in occupancy levels. This would mean that they need less employees. And so some hotels have already begun the process of laying off employees. The question to this government: what is the plan to cushion the blow so that this Omicron variant will cause less pain on less people within our country? Something must happen now. What is the new marketing campaign? What are the new measures that the tourism minister will implement to ensure that people that may not have the confidence to travel, what are we going to do within the spread and the spiraling of Omicron variant and the fact that crew members are getting sick on airlines? What are we going to do to ensure that this has as little as possible an impact on our tourism sector, on the employees of the sector, on the small businesses that depend on the industry for its very survival? What are we going to do about those initiatives? How are we going to drive confidence so that the travel community internationally would look at St. Lucia's protocols? What's the plan in the new trend where we see that the UK, for example, has just announced that people coming to the UK does not require to be tested. Vaccination travelers don't have to be tested. Is St. Lucia going to follow suit? Will the rest of the Caribbean jurisdictions follow suit? Will we stand alone? Or will we just react as usual to a bad situation? And so when we talk about the lack of leadership, these are the issues that we're referring to. We were told by this administration while in opposition that there were 2 St. Lucias. They said that there was one for the tourists and one for the locals. But I have in my possession, if the leader can just help me, a copy of the latest protocols. And in the latest protocols, we see that there are 2 St. Lucias. We see clearly that there are exemptions in what you can and you cannot do, what locals can do and what tourists can do. This is plain here in Section 6 of the new protocols. And so I am not by any means expressing that we do not understand there's a need for there to be a specialized and targeted approach to the fight of COVID-19. What we were saying all along is that this was necessary so that we can reduce the impact on the effect that COVID-19 would have on our economy, so that we can create more jobs, so that we can create more opportunities for businesses, so that we can secure a very strong market for our farmers, so that our taxi drivers can have as many trips as possible, and so that our retail sector, which depend on the industry, that they would remain in business. And which is another reason why we went ahead and we very aggressively and ambitiously brought back the cruise ships, so that our vendors can get many more opportunities to be able to sell their produce. It's a shame that the vendors have not been able to benefit as much as they should. And I feel it for my friend Ras Iper, the president of the Vendors Association, who continues to do a tremendous job in making his voice heard for the hundreds of vendors that he represents. And so I call on the government to institute NEMAC meetings again, so that people like Ras Iper, so that the teachers who have expressed anxieties about school reopening, the teachers' unions, the churches, and everyone can come together and discuss the salient matters that are related to the management of COVID-19. This cannot be a secret, or this cannot just be the cabinet of ministers deciding what is going to happen and what the new protocols are going to be and what the new approach will be, judging by the cabinet's leadership and management of this process. We cannot continue to trust them. We cannot continue to trust them for consistency. We cannot trust them for integrity, or we cannot trust them that they will ensure that the first science will be the health science, the economic science, to protect our lives, to protect our health, and to protect our jobs. What we continue to see is this government pandering to various sectors. This government trying to please as many demographics as possible to ensure that their political advantage is sustained. But you know what? There comes a time, and that time is already now, when people have already rejected this administration, when they've already rejected your piecemeal approach to leadership on the various issues that are affecting the country right now. But I go back to that important issue of there being two St. Lucias, where the government has clearly broken its promises about having special treatment for the tourism industry. And this continues to happen. And what we're saying is that the United Workers' Party feels extremely vindicated that you had to go back and to do the very same things that we did, but only is that we did them better, and we were willing to sacrifice any political advantage at the altar so that we can create jobs, we can save as many people as possible. We left a very good foundation for you. The COVID-19 respiratory hospital was already established. The Cuban Medical Brigade was already here in St. Lucia. We set up the protocols to reopen the tourism industry. We instituted income support. We beefed up the testing capacity of the country. And what you have done in 5 short months is that the SLP administration has squandered all of the great work that we have done. Now you are always caught with yourselves off guard. You're always surprised by spikes and never ahead of what is taking place in this country. And so today the call is for better leadership. Today the call is for more decisive and visionary leadership. Today the call is for more courageous leadership. And we continue to see that when there is a lack of vision in a government, that people all across a nation continue to perish. We cannot take any more of this administration. We call on you to do your jobs. Stop blaming the police. It's not the police that need to do more about crime. It is you that have to lead from the front and stop protecting your friends. Start by showing a good example. Start with the cabinet of ministers. Start to show the people that as a prime minister, that you will set an example and that you have a zero tolerance for suspected fellows. You cannot be saying to people that you have a zero tolerance for crime, and then there is a minister within your cabinet that doesn't have a visa. You cannot be saying to people that you have a zero tolerance for crime, and then there's another minister who's embroiled in a pension scandal. You cannot say that you have a zero tolerance on criminality when another minister in your cabinet made a false declaration to the customs. Lead by example and stop passing the buck. You are the ones that the people elected to lead the country. It is time you do your jobs and stop passing the buck. I thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you, Dominic Fede, Senator Dominic Fede, former representative of Ancillary Canneries. Among the statements which were made by the Prime Minister yesterday were those relating to COVID-19 and the government's decision to continue opening the schools. Senator Angelina Ferropolios will discuss these issues pertaining to the reopening of schools and the lack of adequate measures to contain the COVID spread.
A pleasant good morning to all St. Lucians, all our viewers, our listeners. Now there is so much to be said, so I will delve right into my presentation. The words uncaring, irresponsible, incredibly poor timing are some of those that were used by the St. Lucia Labour Party while they were in opposition to describe the former UWP administration regarding the decision to reopen school for face-to-face instruction. At the time of those utterances, in January of 2021, we had just witnessed the Christmas spike in the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths, and we were vehemently chastised for reopening schools. And I'm sure all of you can remember that. When we contrast the daily infection rates in January of last year and this year, we see a stark increase in each case. And I just want to share a few examples with you. On January 13th last year, 12 cases were recorded daily, as opposed to 568 cases recorded at the same time this year. A difference of how many? 556 cases. On January 14th of 2021, the daily infection rate was 41 cases. And January 14th this year, it stood at 460 64 cases. A difference of another over 400 cases. And as of Sunday, January 16th, the daily infection rate was recorded at 281 compared to 35 cases at about the same time last year. An increase of 246, 7 times more. Fellow St. Lucians, and you know what is most alarming? This January 2022, exactly 1 year later, at a time when a highly contagious COVID-19 variant is raging through our population, the same SLP administration, the Minister of Education, the Honorable Sean Edward, opened schools and announced yesterday at a press conference that schools will remain open for face-to-face instruction for the time being. Given the chaos, the anxieties, and the many concerns expressed by teachers, parents, principals, the teachers' union, and the general public regarding keeping students in school for face-to-face instruction amidst a surge in the number of infected cases, the United Workers' Party makes a strong appeal to this Labour administration to be more measured and responsible in their approach to the management of the COVID-19 pandemic in the education system. During Monday's press conference, the Minister of Education noted that the health and safety of teachers, students, principals, and ancillary staff is the #1 priority of his government and his ministry. If this is so, Mr. Minister, why then there seems to be a lack of synergy and coordination among stakeholders regarding the decision to keep children in schools at this time? We applaud you for wanting students to remain in school to ensure that meaningful learning takes place. However, it appears that there is a clear disconnect and a lack of communication between your ministry and the National Principal Association. For according to the president of the association, they are so disappointed with your press statement. For what they expected, given the current COVID-19 situation, was a brief closure of schools during which the situation would be closely monitored. Fellow St. Lucians, the minister also went on to place on record the discussions held with the teachers' union last week Friday. Consultation that should have taken place prior to his decision to reopen school for traditional face-to-face instruction. Notwithstanding the discussions held, and despite the recommendation made by the teachers' union in a letter dated January 17th to its members, for schools to revert to distributed learning for a period of at least 2 weeks, the Minister of Education has once again played deaf. We ask why? Why is there a reluctance on the part of the Minister of Education to take the advice and suggestion offered by the National Principal Association and the President of the Teachers Union? Instead of offering lip service, it would be most prudent of the Minister to demonstrate by his actions that the health and safety of the teachers, frontline workers, the principals, the students, ancillary staff is not being compromised. Visiting the schools to speak with the principals and the teachers would give you an opportunity to gain a better understanding and appreciation for the numerous health and safety concerns of the educators, the students, and other staff members. I am not sure if you have done that, but you seem to be unaware of what exists, what obtains on the ground at various schools on the island. In the very same letter to its members, the president of the Teachers Union indicated that the Minister of Education assured the organization that if the cases exceeded higher than the figures prior to the reopening of school, the ministry would meet to review school operations. Again, the reactive approach being taken by this government comes to the fore. Waiting and watching all night long to see if the figures will increase. Causing your own colleague, the Minister of Health, anxiety due to sleep deprivation. What a joke. What about those who are experiencing flu-like symptoms, may have been infected, but refuse to go to the clinics to be tested, while the virus rages on in families and communities? Or is it that there is a determined attempt on the part of this government to play the politics irrespective of the consequences? In Guyana, we are told, based on reports, that 15 children have died. We don't envy this situation in St. Lucia. And yes, we are told that the Omicron variant, although highly contagious, is not as disastrous. But how do we know for certain how each child will respond to the virus if he or she contracts the disease? We need to be more proactive and to do all that we can to minimize and eventually avoid any more deaths. And of course, any disruptions in schools, businesses, and all the other sectors in our country. In France, scores of teachers supported by their unions have staged a street protest to express the anger at which the French government is handling COVID-19 situations in schools, and they are calling for more protection. This is not to suggest that the teachers in our schools should do the same. But if this government continues to disregard the plight of the very persons who deliver instruction to the nation's children, refuse to take heed of the suggestions and recommendations of the organizations that represent them, then tell us, Mr. Minister, what else are they left to do? What else are they left to do? Fellow St. Lucians, the Labour Party administration continues to prove its incompetence, lack of vision, and inability to manage the pandemic. They have also fooled many of you into believing that they are working in your best interest, when in fact they are hell-bent on rewarding corruption, destabilizing families, victimizing workers, threatening you, silencing those who wish to speak out, and creating a St. Lucia that is inundated with unhappiness, misery, anger, and frustration. This cannot go on for too long. And hence the reason the opposition is calling on this government to do better. Put away your political pride. Stop the making me feel good mentality and do what is necessary to respond to the needs of the people of this country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelina Ferropolius, Senator, Dennery North. Next at the podium, we're going to be moving right along. Former Prime Minister, current parliamentary representative for Micoud North, for Micoud South, leader of the United Workers' Party and leader of the opposition, Alan Chasney.
Good morning, everyone. I'm extremely mindful of everybody's time this morning. I want to thank Dominique Fede and also Farah Polius for two outstanding presentations in response to the so-called press conference that was held yesterday. I want to deal with some of the more salient points that the Prime Minister brought up yesterday. And I want to say that in years past, our policy really has been to respond to people when they have something of substance to say. When there are actual facts that are put on the table that we could potentially contest. And I see that sadly in the new era that we're in, that the truth is what you make it to believe. And the truth is not always supported by facts. And so we will no longer allow the SLP government to define who we are. We will no longer allow the SLP government to make inaccurate, erroneous statements. So first of all, Prime Minister started off by indicating that they had inherited an economic and social disaster due to the maladministration, reckless borrowing, and corruption over the last 5 years. So let's dismantle that aspect and break the term of the United Workers' Party down into two parts: pre-COVID and post-COVID. So if we look at the numbers from 2016 to 2019, and let's take 2019 as our benchmark here. So after 2.5 years of United Workers' Party's policies. And remember, when we came into government, it was doom and gloom. The unemployment level was 25%. They had not grown the economy in 5 years. We had seen one of the largest increases in the debt of this country. And literally, the country was stagnant. If anything, it was actually moving backwards. And I think that was reflected at the polls. We saw that in 3 years, we were able to decrease the unemployment from 25% to 17 or 16.1%. We reduced youth unemployment from 44% to 31%. We upgraded 14 health facilities. We started the St. Jude's, the redevelopment of the St. Jude's hospital. We were able to start the HIA airport. We spent over $150 million in road improvements. We started the West Coast, got the funding completed for the West Coast Road, and the West Coast Road now is on the process of starting. We've seen the work at Cul-de-Sac Bridge, which is already started. We redeveloped and re-strengthened the John Compton Dam that had been sick for so many years and had exposed St. Lucia and to St. Lucians. The water project in the south, the people in the south had been waiting for water for so long. We see the continuation of that project where we're going to take water production from 1 million gallons a day to almost 4.5 million gallons a day. The water project in Deriso, the water project in Choiseul, the water project in Dennery, which we continued. And not only did we complete the phase started by the SLP government, but we actually went into a second phase of development of water in the south. housing projects in Blasha, in Bosha, in Lafargue and Forestier. And we've now seen afterwards the beginning of the Shock and also the Tavern housing developments. School repairs. We spent over $30 million on fixing up the schools of this country. Sporting facilities, Groselet Academy, the Denry Sporting Complex, the Miku football field, the Deriso football field, the Soufriere Mini Stadium, and lights throughout the length and breadth of St. Lucia, including Lafargue. Most importantly, we did all of this by reducing VAT. And we also were able to increase government revenues by almost 20% from when we first came into office. Does that sound like a country in despair? Does that sound like you would have inherited nothing? And then we had COVID. COVID has become a global pandemic. It is probably one of the worst, both health, psychological, education, and economic crises of our time. And we still don't know the full outfall of COVID. I call it post-COVID trauma, which is both going to be in education, going to be in health, going to be in people's state of mind. What did we see? Government lost in 2020 to 2021 over $400 million in revenue. We had bonds that were being redeemed and the government had to find another $180 million in order to be able to pay those bondholders. Because we now had to expedite the movement into OKEU, we now had the cost of moving into OKEU, plus we had to maintain the cost of running Victoria Hospital. So we saw that there was an increase in the operating cost of government by almost $15 million a month. What did we do? Because of the work that we had done in the previous 3 years, the confidence that the international institutions had in St. Lucia, and the substantially improved fiscal outlook for St. Lucia, we were able to borrow $320 million EC. Primarily from the World Bank, the IMF, and CDB. And these were not ordinary borrowings. These were borrowings that we were able to get it for 40 years, a 10-year moratorium at 0.5%. And these are monies that are made available to countries when they hit these kinds of international crises, a shock. Everywhere in the world, we saw countries having to borrow money. So this idea that borrowing money was unique to St. Lucia, or this government, my government, was acting recklessly. How could you make that in the face of the facts that we've seen? In fact, United Workers' Party, as the tradition goes, operated exemplary between 2016 and 2019. Our government was the first government to understand that we had to coexist with COVID. That's going back to March of 2020. We talked about lives and livelihoods and what we had to do to find that balance. Because I want to give St. Lucians an analogy. If you are in a dark room and you're blindfolded and you've never been in that room before, would you find yourself running through that room? Or would you find yourself taking your time and feeling your way until you know and get a safer ground? And you go back to some of the basic things you know. That is exactly what we had to do. We had to temper our ambition. Our debt to GDP went from 59%. Imagine that in our 5 years we were able to bring the debt to GDP back down below the prudential level. And because of the borrowings of COVID, it went to 83%. But I want to put that 83% in context. St. Lucia's GDP contracted by 20%. And 80% of that contraction was because of tourism. Something that we had no control over. Planes were not flying. People were not allowed to fly. Did we sit and come and have press conferences to complain about the performance of the previous administration? No. We found solutions to the problem. And the best solution that we had in mind was, in order to make up for tourism, because we did not know where tourism was going to go, we would put our best foot forward, we would live in hope and expect the worst. And what did we find out? Construction. Construction and the call center businesses were the areas in which we felt we could get immediate responses to make up for the shortfall of tourism. I'm proud of the work that we did with ITEL BPO in getting over 1,000 kids employed. I'm proud of what we did with Ojo Labs. I'm proud that what we did with KM Squared and many of the other call centers, in which we were able to make up a significant amount of the jobs that were lost in tourism. And the other area was in construction. And we immediately found fiscal space in order to get projects started on roads. And what was the goal? The goal was not to cut the grass on the side of the road that within 6 weeks the grass would be back and we have nothing to show for the money. The goal was to meaningfully employ people, not for 1 week or 2 weeks, but for months at a time. And many of the solutions who had equipment, in order to get them, they have additional revenue in their homes. And at the end of the day, we would have built up a capacity in the country, and when this awful period of this pandemic comes to an end, that St. Lucia is ready to rise like a phoenix out of the ashes. But we never came and complained. Never complained once about what was taking place at COVID and said, oh, look what the Lord has done to us. We put on our boots, we rolled up our sleeves, and we did what we do the best. We worked. Now, let us look at the results. The Prime Minister likes to talk about the science. He's following the science, always following the science. He can't tell you what the science is, but he's following the science. Well, United Workers' Party also followed the science. Yeah. So let's look at the science of United Workers' Party for 18 months and the science of Labour Party for 5 months. In 18 months, United Workers' Party saw 80 deaths and 5,500 cases in 18 months. The Labour Party in 5 months have had 230 deaths and 11,300 cases. The numbers speak for itself. The only science that the Labour Party is following is political science. And Farah spoke about it. The ability to make the tough decisions. Not always do you give your child what the child wants. And I'm not saying that the people of St. Lucia are children, because I know how we take these things. I'm making an analogy. As a government, you cannot always just do what everybody wants. You have to do what is right. And the government is in a better place in many occasions to make that decision because they have more information available to them. And the reality is, the science of the United Workers' Party was the right science. And it was the one that provided solutions with the greatest amount of protection from a health perspective, and at the same time allowed our economy to be able to grow. So let's take this Christmas period. Everyone in the government is admitting that they knew that there was going to be an outbreak after Christmas. They had last Christmas to go by, and they had the results of the elections. Anytime there's going to be an increase in social activities in our country, there is going to be a consequential increase in cases. If you cared about the people of this country, why would you have not sacrificed Christmas and New Year's? 2 weeks. In order to protect the lives of many St. Lucians and their livelihoods. Yeah. The same students that you say you care about. Yep. Would you not know that because you had an outbreak, there was a possibility that you would have to send kids back home? Yeah. United Workers' Party wants to see the kids in school. We genuinely believe that kids are safer in school. But that is undermined when you are having these kinds of numbers, and it takes consultation. Consultation. I want to bring up radical vaccines. Really? We're still having this conversation? My government came out and held a press conference to say we were purchasing vaccines and that we were participating with Bahamas and Barbados to purchase those vaccines. We told everybody how much we were paying for the vaccines. All of the documentation is there. The Ministry of Health vetted, Attorney General's office vetted contract, and the Ministry of Finance. To come and suggest that there was some breach in the procurement act is irresponsible. And what is more irresponsible is the Prime Minister knows that the money has already been paid and the rest of the money is due to be paid within the next 30 days. Where is our money from Rochamel? Where is the loss of revenue from Grindberg? Where is the millions of dollars that were lost in cost overruns? And then the Prime Minister has the audacity to say that what the $7 million could have been used for. At the time that we were making the purchases, we had no vaccines. None of the countries in the developed world were giving us. Both as a Prime Minister, OECS and CARICOM. We made pleas to the UK, to Canada, to the United States, African Union, every single opportunity, everywhere we could try to search to get vaccines. It was the Indian government that finally came through to us in a small but a very meaningful way at the time. I had no idea. I knew that we were going to be going to elections, and I knew what the fallout would have been from elections. And I wanted to give every single St. Lucian who wanted to be vaccinated an opportunity to be vaccinated. Because we at the time did not have enough vaccines if people wanted to become vaccinated. That is the chance we took. The examples around the world of people that got scammed. And we were aware of it. And so I want to make it very clear. The reason I went with that direction with Radical is, one, because Barbados and Bahamas were involved. Two, the gentleman does business in St. Lucia and owns land in St. Lucia. So that means that if he did not fulfill on his contract of supplying the vaccines and also did not fulfill on his obligation to repay the money, that the government of St. Lucia would have recourse. And those are some of the difficult decisions that you have to make when you're a Prime Minister. But I did it in the best interest of the people of this country. I was spending the money on vaccines. Now I want to know that when the Prime Minister receives the entire amount, he's already received $1 million US, how he's going to spend it.
Step program.
I want to talk about bananas. You talk about inheriting a mess when we came into government. NFTO, a disaster, had never worked. And I can say it, incapable and incompetent. And a lot of the problems that we had today was because NFTO could not make sure that the standard of bananas and the consistency of that standard was there in order for us to continue to secure our market in the UK. Windfresh. This government, again, has no shame. It was under their administration that Windfresh was allowed to make investments in factories and investments in the OECS and the Windward Islands, in St. Lucia, in Dominica, in St. Vincent and Grenada. And not one of those investments is profitable. And as a result of that, Windfresh was subsidizing the losses. And so the millions of dollars that the government had to find out of our coffers in order to make sure that the banana farmers were being paid and the market remained open was for that inefficiency. And I am proud of the fact that we actively participated in the receivership of Windfresh to make sure that the most important thing that Windfresh had, which was GEAST and the transportation, that we did everything to secure that. And I think that we're well on our way, if you have a committed government, with the re-establishment and now the involvement of government in NFTO, of the possibility that bananas are going to be rescued. And this continual claim by the Labour Party that there was something wrong with the French market. Are you telling me that a government that had ambitions of diversifying a new market, what's the difference between talking about the French market and the Caribbean market, and sell his bananas? I think that that is a good thing. Since it's been started, and the one that was just laughable is that an OKEU that's not financed. We said it in our campaign in 2016. The reason why the Labour Party never opened up OKEU and only had a naming ceremony is they did not know where to find the money to operate it. For 3 years we've made it public. We've had all kinds of discussions. The estimated cost of running OKEU is $17 million a year. Estimate. The actual cost of running Victoria is $35 million. And that's why we were going to introduce healthcare insurance. Because we knew that the government could not pay for the operating cost of OKEU or our health services by ourselves. And that's why we said affordable quality healthcare. And today, that would have been introduced. Today, St. Lucians would have benefited from a $70,000 insurance coverage per year. And we would not be sitting here worrying about where the money was going to come from to fund OKU. But what has happened, in typical Labour fashion, you will run ahead of everybody else to scream something without thinking and getting the facts. And now they are finding themselves, how are they going to keep it operational? And to make matters worse, you were supposed to have shut down Victoria and transferred that money to OKEU. You're still having to run Victoria because of COVID. The corruption and the rule of law. The Prime Minister said that he will apply the full force of the law against people who are in breach of it. Hollow words, because the evidence of his action is there not to speak for itself. Rovergate. The evidence is so clear. And my fellow St. Lucians, it's a simple question. If in fact the Labour government wants to defend Ernest Hilaire in what he did, then let's open it up to everybody, because you said you're going to put everybody first. So does it mean now that I can expect that I can go to the St. Lucia High Commission in the UK, tell them I want to buy a car, give them the money, have them buy the car in the name of the High Commission so I can get my duty free, and that they will then transfer the car back to me? Is that now available to all St. Lucians? Is that what we're saying we can do? For those people who say nothing was done wrong, if nothing was done wrong, then wow, there's a loophole, and let's take advantage of it. And let all St. Lucians, let all our minibus drivers and all our taxi drivers and let all our farmers now buy their vehicles in the UK duty free to save 12.5%. The minister's account, the report is there. The St. Jude's report, audit, the report is there. To put a man in your ministry, it's your discretion who you make a minister. All of the information has been made public on Richard Frederick. And while the people of Castries Central can pick and choose who they want, the decision to put him in your cabinet is rests on the shoulders of the Prime Minister. And if the Prime Minister wants to speak about integrity and following the rule of law, start there. Start with all of these. Do you know how much more meaningful it would be, those words that you are providing, if in fact you started in your own house? Seditious statements. So when Mr. Henry went to a church, and we right now believe with a gun, with the intention of killing Guy Joseph. Not anybody's church, you know. He left his home, got in a car, and deliberately went to Guy Joseph's church. The following day, I didn't hear the Labour Party condemn that action. In fact, what I saw the Labour Party do was to support Mr. Joachim Henry and to say that he was the victim. Tricia Lionel, when she made her comments about me, I didn't hear the Labour Party say anything. When your own in opposition said that you would take away the citizenships of all the people who became citizens under our administration, that was not seditious. The allegations and the threats that were made against investors in this country, that was not seditious. And more recently, you have a person who was a journalist who is now in the government on the payroll of the public service, who publicly threatens somebody, admits to threatening that person, and you have nothing to say. So I'm saying to you, it's the hypocrisy. Finally, I want to say, United Workers' Party has democratically, in our traditions, accepted the results of the last election. And in fact, facilitated and participated in the peaceful transfer of that authority. I want to say to Mr. Pierre that the only landslide that he has is a landslide in Parliament. The fact is, the Labour Party won with 51.4% of the popular vote, and only 51% of the people turned out, the lowest ever. So I want to say to him, the only landslide that we see right now is a landslide in increases in COVID cases. The only landslide that we see is in victimization. The only landslide that we see is the increase in the number of lies on a daily basis. The landslide in the increases in the number of excuses. But most importantly, and this is the one that the Prime Minister needs to be the most aware of, is in the landslide loss of confidence in his government. The SLP continues to put politics first. So I want to say to you that I believe the real intention of the press conference that was held yesterday was to lay the ground for the budget coming up. First of all, the Prime Minister indicated that the budget was going to be on April 22nd. In keeping with his own claims, that is not what the Financial Act says. In fact, the Financial Act was amended, and he's expected to lay the estimates of the House before the end of February, and he's expected to lay the appropriations bill before the end of March. But I want to say, all of a sudden, trying to lay blame on the economic situation on United Workers' Party to justify and to do what? He has already said that what he wants to do is he wants to lower cost and increase tax revenues. How? How is he going to do that if he is going to waive property taxes? How is he going to do that if he's going to increase the threshold of people paying personal income taxes? How is he going to do that if people no longer going to have to pay property taxes? So I would say to St. Lucians, watch your bread. I believe that this government are giving serious consideration to increasing the VAT rate of this country. And what I don't know is which projects and which ministries they intend to cut. Because that's exactly the direction they're going to go in. And that will be, in fact, another promise that was made. The fact is that there was a budget in 2021, April to be exact. All the facts of what the finances of this country were laid out. Yet in the face of that, they still went and made these irresponsible promises to everyone because they put politics first. It was more important to them to get into government than to run government. And we are going to pay a very serious price as a country for what is taking place. And I want to put Mr. Pierre on notice that this opposition will not be intimidated. Whether he likes it or not, whether he feels I've accepted the loss or not, I take our role as leader of opposition and in opposition very seriously, even if it's only 2 voices. But I've reminded him, and I remind him again, that 70% of the people of St. Lucia either did not vote for the Labour Party or did not vote. And many of those persons now can see for themselves that the big lie is starting to unravel. And United Workers' Party will be ready and will continue to put responsible pressure. We will not make any false allegations against anyone. We will use facts, and I would strongly suggest to the Prime Minister that he is doing himself and the country a disservice when he holds a press conference and only has hollow words, meaning he only has what the symptom is and cannot tell us what the prescription is going to be. And that you are seen as a very weak person, that when you continue to blame others for your plight. You wanted to be Prime Minister. You said it was your turn. You knew what the country was facing. You had 18 months to live with COVID. You could see what was taking place in the entire world. You had the facts at your fingertips. You knew what you were going to get into. The reality is the Labour Party has no plan for the economy, has no plan for improving the social output for St. Lucians, and more importantly, and we're seeing it very dangerously, they have no plan for COVID. I thank you.
Thank you, political leader. Thank you, leader of the opposition, Alan Chastney. This brings us to the end of this UWP press conference. Coming to you live from the headquarters of the United Workers' Party at Colony House in Castries. Want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Hope you have a pleasant day. Please observe the protocols. Wear your mask, hand sanitize, social distancing is important as well. Stay safe. Have a good day. Thank you.